everyone. Welcome to another Freethought in Florida, a production of the atheist community of Polk County. I'm Darrel Ray. I am your host, and I'm one of the directors of the atheist community of Polk County. And I am going to be joined today by Dr. Darrel Ray. No relation that I know of, anyway. We haven't done the 23andMe yet. But Darrel is the author of several books, including The God Virus, How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture, and Sex and God, How Religion Distorts Sexuality. He's the founder of the wonderful organization Recovering from Religion that we point everyone to, and whose podcast I recently had the great honor of serving as audio engineer with Tim Reimel and Bill Prickett. And the Secular Therapy Project. A psychologist for over 40 years and a student of religion, Darrel holds a BA in Sociology, Anthropology, Master's in Religion, and a Doctorate in Psychology, and he'll be a keynote speaker at the upcoming Conference on Religious Trauma, late April in Vancouver. Which brings us to, I think, the obvious opening question, Darrel. With all this study, sex, and heathenry, when do you sleep? And welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I'm pretty damn sure we're not related because that's a long story, but there's no genes between me and the Ray name in my family.
Okay.
So, but I do like to sleep. I get a regular 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night. So don't worry yourself about my sleeping habits.
Great.
But I do have a lot to do. I do work a lot, and I'm retired, so I have lots more time to do what I love doing. And I look back on my life and I think, damn, I'm having more fun now than I've ever had in my whole life.
That's the way to do it.
Exactly what I want to do, and that's help people, in several different ways. So thanks for having me on today.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. We've been wanting to talk to you for a while now. And I've got a few topics that I'd like to talk about, and I'm happy just to kind of let the conversation meander wherever you'd like. But first, for the few folks out there who may not know you, why don't you talk just a little bit about your life and your journey away from fundamental Christianity?
Well, I was born and raised in a very Christian, very religious family. I will say they were semi-fundamentalists. They weren't rabid, so I was lucky. I escaped that, but we were in church almost every time the church doors were open. It was a moderately conservative church, so I didn't get a lot of hellfire and brimstone. In fact, they kind of looked down on those holy rollers and hellfire and brimstone churches. So I saw it from a distance, I guess you could say. I did go to the Baptist Church Boy Scout troop, which was rather interesting because the leaders eventually got caught for messing with the Boy Scouts inappropriately.
Oh, no.
And then I left and tried to tell my parents, and that didn't go too well. But anyway, so I went on to college, and I got exposed I went to Friends University, FU for short. And it was a good Quaker school, good education. I wouldn't recommend it today because it's become fundamentalist since I was there. It's crazy how religious universities have gotten more religious since I was in college. But, then again, I was out protesting the Vietnam War, and it was a Quaker school at the time. It's semi-Quaker now, I guess. And I went through college and really got a good education and was exposed, obviously, to sociology and anthropology and loved it. But at the end, I still wanted to help people. And the whole idea of becoming a psychologist hadn't occurred to me at that point in time. So I thought, I'll just be a minister. That's what my grandfather's a minister. My grandmother and my other grandfather was a major church elder. My dad was an elder. So it just was the logical choice to become a minister. So I went to seminary at Scarrett College for Christian Workers. But the problem with that college was it was a Methodist college. And both my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt all thought I was probably going to go to hell because I went to a Methodist seminary. But I did it anyway. And had a great education. It was a very, very liberal seminary. In fact, people were openly out as gay at this seminary, which blew my mind because I had never met a gay person in my whole life. I mean, isn't that crazy? But I thought I hadn't. And so in the 2 years of hobnobbing with all sorts of people of different colors, different cultures, and different sexual orientations, it really opened my eyes to how limited my background had been, going to Friends University and raised in that. So I got out. I got a job in an area of psychology as working with juveniles, and figured I need to go back and get a real degree now. But I am happy that I got the master's degree in religion, because it really educated me and helped me, gave me a good foundation for writing both my books on sex and God and the God virus. Now I had written in my after I became a psychologist, though, I became actually went into clinical psychology for about 10 years. Then I moved into organizational psychology, and that's where I wrote my first two books on teamwork and organizational psychology kinds of stuff. So that 30 years or 35 years of being an organizational psychologist was an education in how the real world worked, obviously. And I wasn't really doing a lot of activism, but I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to do this kind of stuff. So when I got to a place where I thought I could safely write the book I really wanted to write, and that was The God Virus, I wrote it. I announced to my staff I was writing this book, and my staff just about had a cow. And my office manager, and none of my staff was particularly religious, but my office manager says, "Darrel, we're gonna lose clients." I said, yeah, we might lose one or two, but I'm not worried about it. 6 months later, we had 2 clients left.
Oh my.
Everybody, clients that had been my clients for 20 years, and loved me and loved what I did and loved how much I helped their corporations, just disappeared. Didn't answer emails or phone calls. So it was rather a interesting introduction to what it was like to be an out atheist, because you couldn't very well hide it when you're writing a book like that. And so anyway, I don't know. Is that what you're looking for, Sarah?
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to go back. There was one thing that you mentioned that really struck me, and that is the desire to help people. Once upon a time, I fancied myself going into the ministry. I was probably 13 or 14 or something. I was really young, and I had written some what I thought were good sermons, and my local church, let me give those one Sunday. And now, sort of fast forward, I look at this community that we're building here. We're a brand new baby organization. We just formed formally last March, and I see in myself a lot of that same sort of role. Obviously, like, I care about people. I don't want people to suffer. And I see in people dealing with a lot of this baggage and bullshit that comes with their religion, that, and in many cases, things that have stuck with them, even though they may have shed a religious belief a long time ago. God's gone, but then there's some of these other toxic things that haven't dropped off yet, and they may not know that they're connected. And I think as an organizer, one of the sort of core tenets of our mission is to change the perception of what an atheist is to the general public.
Right. Yeah.
And that's real hard to do when people are out on, Facebook and Twitter being asshole atheists. But I recognize that anger. I recognize that, religion hurt me and people lied to me, and I'm mad right now, and I need to do something about it. So I see our role very much in finding those people, giving them a place for community, and then helping them heal through that so we can be productive.
Right. Well, I think you've hit an interesting observation, that the notion of the angry atheist is not a myth. It's actually a stage of development that I've been watching. I've always been interested in developmental psychology, and this is related to that, because when people when people have a massive change in worldview and they look back and they perceive, and rightfully so, that they were cheated, they were miseducated, that they were lied to, it's pretty damn reasonable to get angry about that. And people do become angry. Now, the problem is when they get stuck in that angry phase and they can't find a substitute, or they can't deal with the anger in a way that motivates them to move in a different direction. And I am concerned about that a lot as well, Sarah, that the angry piece, of course, gets in the way of really helping people who might otherwise be leaving their religions. You get the not all religious people kind of response to the angry atheist that comes out and says all religion's bullshit. Well, I pretty much agree with that. All religion's bullshit, but you're probably not going to get a lot of ears to listen to you if you come in with that angle.
Yep.
So you and I are on the same page there.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed just in our own community, having to, I want to use the word shepherd people along, but that's something that we have to be aware of and help people through as best we can. And I think when we're building these communities, I'm looking for the therapists who are part of the secular community, is there a program that we can develop here locally that, would help people, if it's affiliating with Recovering from Religion and having a peer support group or whatever it is that, that we need to do here locally to help people out. I am all about that.
Well, you're actually asking the right question at the right time. Oh man, my memory's not serving me well right now, but you've got some people in the Orlando area that are looking to start an oasis right there. Of course, I know you're more in the Tampa Bay area, aren't you?
We're about an hour from both. We're right, sort of right in between.
Right in the middle. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's even better in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were in the Tampa Bay and Sarasota area more because you met my best friend, Dan Dana.
Oh, Dan spoke at our educational meeting last weekend. He's great. I love Dan.
Dan is one of the coolest people on the planet. He and I have known each other since like 1982. And we used to live here in Kansas City where I live. And we would see each other, have supper once a month for like 20 years.
Wow.
Among other things, of course. But we have a great relationship. Really miss it.
He claims he's one of the few people around that can say that he heard you say, "I'm a Christian."
Yeah. Well, I have to confess that Dan is one of the 2 or 3 biggest reasons why I'm an atheist today.
Wow.
Because he wasn't an asshole atheist. He wasn't an angry atheist, but he was an atheist, and he wasn't going to back down on that. So, we were having a discussion on homosexuality, and I was still a Christian. Now, I was an extremely liberal Christian, but I had been brainwashed that, homosexuality was a sin and all that bullshit.
Yep.
And we got into a discussion. I remember it like it happened yesterday, between him and another guy, a friend of ours, Bob Abrams, in a hotel room. And I said, "I'm a Christian, and I think it's a sin." And they both looked at me like I'd just flown in from Mars or something. I mean, like, how could you say that, Darrel? We thought you were intelligent. And they were kind to me. They weren't, they listened, and they didn't argue with me. They just basically told me, how wrong I was in a very polite way. And it made me think, and within a week, I'd gotten rid of all that bullshit.
Wow.
It was amazing how fast I flipped. And it was because I had 2 caring, non-judgmental friends that didn't back down, but they didn't push anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me. It helped me do a little bit of examination. So for that, I've always been thankful for Dan and Bob. I'm still friends with both of them. Although Bob's not living in the States anymore. He's the expat down in somewhere in Guatemala or somewhere, I think.
Wow.
But anyway, that's kind of
I
the
love
long
it. That's
story
great.
about my relationship with Dan. He's a psychologist too, as you know, and the world's expert on mediation.
Yes.
But he's written a good little essay, or I guess a little more than an essay, on atheism himself, and it's well worth reading.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he exposed you to that when he talked.
He did, absolutely, and of course his presentation on mediation, it comes at a really good time. Again, so our community group, we organized as a 501c3 very, very recently ago, and so this is having a secular community for people to come and listen to speakers and go do social things and march in the streets. That's new for a lot of people. It was new for us, and so there are people around who have not had a supportive community, who are dealing with religious family. We're a very Polk County has sort of a reputation that precedes itself. One of the comedians that we love, who's from here, he's a school teacher. Devin Siebold likes to say Polk County more guns than teeth. So.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. We're a big red blob on a map, lots of, rural communities, and the county geographically is huge. We have a lot of land area.
Yeah.
And so but there's a lot of people here who are dealing with, generational religious family, and, how can I come out to them? I want to live my life openly and authentically, but also, mom or grandma or dad or whoever has got this going on, or maybe they know, and that's causing tension. And then, so you've got that in one hand, and on the other hand, we have the sort of divided political climate that we have right now. And so, Dan's mediation messages were timed just perfectly. I think it was great. So let's talk about sex. Baby. Big shift here, eh? Yes. Let's downshift into sex. So you sort of mentioned a liberal Christian, and you had friends who exposed you to different things. At what point did you when did the passion for human sexuality come in, and when did your interest in sort of studying the effects of religion on human sexuality really come into being?
Well, I've been interested in sex since I was 12 years old.
Yes.
And I kept asking my mom questions. Now, my mom was a reasonably open-minded for a pretty religious person. And she got tired of hearing me ask all the questions. So she took me down to the public library in Wichita, Kansas, where I was growing up. And we went through the adult section of the library, where all the sex stuff was. And I don't mean Playboy. I mean academic books and stuff like that. And those were books that I could not check out at 12 years old. They would not let me do that.
Right.
So, but my mom, I had a high, obviously I was pretty bright, and I had a high reading comprehension. So she let me check out any book I wanted. I checked out a half a dozen of the biggest tomes on sex and sexuality I could find in that library. And probably within a month, I had them all read. And I quickly realized there ain't nothing in those books. They're all pushed. They're all useless, and they were contradictory. And so therein began my journey. Of course, at 12 and 13 years old, all the other boys are horny as hell and wanting to know about sex. So I became the resident sexologist in my junior.
That's useful. Yeah.
So it was rather early in my career that I became the expert on sex. And the funny thing was, I'm the expert on sex because I read a lot of books that are wrong about sex. So what did I do? I had to go do my research, and I found my dad's pornography stash. Now, my dad, of course, was an elder in the church, and my mom and dad hated pornography. Or at least that's what they told us. So
it's quite the mixed message. Yeah.
It was hard to find the pornography, and therein lies the basis for my true education about sexuality, and it has been ever since. So I can, and when I was in college, even though Friends University was a religious school, I was taking anthropology.
Yep.
And one of the key things that Margaret Mead wrote about was sex and growing up, sex and adolescence in three primitive societies. That was the name of the book, or something like that. Well, hell yeah, I was reading that book 2 or 3 times probably to learn all about the sex. And I didn't realize that, wow, other cultures have totally different approaches to human sexuality.
Yeah.
That was like totally new to me. I just thought Christian sex was the only kind of sex you could have, and that everybody on the planet had that kind of sex, missionary, once a month.
Sure.
Even though I was masturbating 4 or 5 times a day at the time, probably. And when my first girlfriend and I got together, we were fucking, 3 or 4 times a day if my parents weren't around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I had the damn good sense to use a condom, and she did too. Unfortunately, my 3 younger brothers, were 4 boys in our family, but 3 younger brothers, none of them seemed to have the common sense to do it, so all of them got pregnant.
Yep.
And then ended up having to get married.
Oh yeah.
Because back then, this was, and I'm a little older than you, but this was like the 1960s. And there were a lot of people in our community that got, a lot of girls got pregnant who were in our youth group. And they were all being taught the purity bullshit and taught, save sex until marriage. Well, when they get pregnant, of course, they have to get married. And more than half a dozen friends of mine were married by the time they were 19 years old, largely because the girl got pregnant. I escaped that fate, thankfully. Wow.
Well, you're bringing up some stuff that I'm going to lean on you a little bit. I was asked to be a part of a panel that's happening February 6th at the First Baptist Church in Bartow, and it's put on by the Polk Teen Pregnancy Prevention Alliance. This is an open event, an annual thing open to the public, and it's called Festival of Faith, where they encourage the faith community to get involved in pregnancy prevention.
Okay.
So we very, very quickly gained a good community partner at Planned Parenthood, and she invited me to be a part of this. I guess, I haven't been to any of them in the past, so I don't know what to expect. But apparently it's just been faith leaders sort of sitting around talking about, and I'll share with you the topics. It's a short list. But
what is the short list? Just give me the short list here.
It's, as a faith leader, how do you talk to your youth about sex? What would you tell a parent to do if their youth was having sex? What does your faith say about the purpose of sex? That kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
So,
and you're going to be on a panel for this?
Yes. So I'm sort of a wild card, and I'm thrilled that she recognized the need to bring in a secular voice. And she talked to me too about like language changes of, what's a better version of interfaith, so that, because I don't have faith, and but we should still be included in the conversation. So I'm not really sure what to expect, but hopefully I'll be a good representative for the, medically accurate, pro-science, evidence-based solutions.
Okay. I have to jump in here and say, congratulations. You have just achieved something I've only done once in my life. That's been able to tell and talk to actively religious people about sex.
Yeah.
So congratulations. Wow. Cool. Okay. We need to clone you or find a way to get... Of course, after you talk to him, you may never get asked.
I may not. Yes. Yeah.
So let me give you some real, Darrel's unsolicited, excellent advice.
I'm ready.
Very early on, like within a minute after you open your mouth, you need to ask, or you need to make a very positive statement about masturbation. And because that's where human sexuality starts. So I would say something like, every human being has sex, and they're going to have sex one way or the other. So let's get honest. Masturbation is a normal activity. Every human animal does it. Every animal, practically, every mammal does it. So let's not program ourselves to shame anyone for masturbating. And oh, by the way, when you masturbate, you're probably thinking about things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Normalize, please do this, Sarah. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Normalize masturbation within a minute after you get in there, and you will mess up everybody else's mind in the room. They will never ask you to come back again, but you will save a whole lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
And you can also recommend a good book called Sex and God, of course.
Yes, of course.
But whether you recommend the book's irrelevant. What I have learned, and I'm just going to say, what I've learned in this is you can pussyfoot around this shit all the time, and you'll get nowhere. Mm-hmm. But if you're straight, you're honest, you're kind, you're generous in the way you come out, you're not judgmental, but you're matter of fact, what can they do?
Right.
Say you're totally wrong because Jesus? That ain't going to work. These kids know better. They've got the internet. They're looking at porn right now.
Sure.
While you and I are talking, one of those kids you're going to be talking to,
yep,
or is going to hear this, is already looking at porn. So here's the deal. You're the only honest person in the room. I did a talk. I didn't do a talk. Dan Barker did a talk. He actually did a debate here in Lawrence, Kansas that I attended. And he debated one of the top evangelical ministers in town. And I can't remember the exact title, but it was basically, do religious people lie? And I thought that was an interesting topic, of course. So I attended, and the room is filled, half with Christians and half with a bunch of atheists. And there's probably 400 people in the room. So there was a lot of secular people in the room and it almost divided. On the right-hand side of the room were the Christians, on the left-hand side were the atheists. And that was totally accidental. I don't think that was intended. So at the end of the debate between Dan and this guy named Gene, and he is a big deal in this area. One thing they never mentioned was sexuality. Never. So I got up in the question and answer period. I was the second person up in the line. And I say, hey, Gene, I have a question for you. Do you masturbate? And he just kind of freezes. And there's silence. I mean, for a long time. And then he says, I plead the fifth. Well, of course, half the room breaks out laughing at that.
Sure.
Time. And I turn to the room and I say, I masturbate. How many of you masturbate? Of course, everybody on the secular side's raising their hand, mm-hmm. and nobody on the Christian side. So I just turned back to Gene and I say, Gene, I think we have a lot of evidence that Christians lie. And I sat down.
Wow. Wow.
I'm glad I did that. It was a lesson for me. I never thought of doing that before. But once I did that, I realized you've got to be honest. Yep. They cannot be honest about their own behavior. Every one of those people in that room that you're going to be talking to masturbated, mm-hmm. or masturbates. And most of them look at pornography and they don't want to admit it. Yep. And they start talking about bullshit around porn addiction and all that kind of stupidity.
Yep.
And I just want to let people know, no, you don't have to be like that. You can try to be a Christian and honest, but that's pretty hard to do.
Well, and I'm gonna try to obviously approach this from a place of generosity. I don't know what all of these, because I don't know what all denominations are represented. I don't know these people yet. I'll report back on the next episode.
Okay.
So one of the other things that, if somebody asks me, well, gosh, why are you doing this? One, it's a great opportunity to get the science sort of viewpoint out to the people that need to hear it, but also there are likely some people there in faith leadership roles or in certain positions that if we can build alliances, I'm here for that. One of the things that, and this is where I have to kind of drag the angry atheists along with us, is, look, if I can identify a preacher who will agree that, say, church-state separation is important because it protects both our government and his church, we can stand together on that small piece of common ground and sort of hopefully build some things from there. And I don't have to agree with everything they're doing, and I think the God belief is dumb, and all of those other things. But if there's something that we can work together on, I'm looking for that. And so another one of those things is, I'm in Florida, guess what our public schools teach about sex? Don't eat the cookie, right? Just don't do it. And so at some point, there will be another movement to face the public education, the local school board or the state education agency, and say comprehensive sex ed is important. It's medically accurate. It has to be inclusive of GSRM identities. Here's all of these things. And the secular community being able to stand alongside faith leaders who also get it is a powerful message, I think. When the time comes, that's going to be a good thing to have.
Absolutely.
Yep. So that's another thing. We talk about all of these identities. So obviously I'm trans. I grew up in a real small town in the middle of nowhere, Illinois.
Yeah.
We had a town of 1,400. I had a high school graduating class of 32.
Wow.
We had no stoplights and 8 churches. Yep. So
now that's a new one. No stoplights with 8 churches. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Well, it was 9, but one of them they sold it, and it was a knick-knack shop for a while, and then it was a bed and breakfast. And it's, as far as I know, it's for sale again now. If you're interested in owning an old church, you can do that. But so I graduated high school in '97, and gay was still a hushed, sort of 4-letter word even then.
Right.
So to be trans, we didn't even have words for that, man. Like, I can remember stumbling on crossdressers.com like early on in the internet and finally recognizing like, wow, there are people out there who are thinking and feeling some of the same things that I am. Right. So as toxic as the internet is and can be, thank goodness for that. But now I look back, and I'm interested in your perspective, looking back through, all of the years that you've spent in the field. Sort of, I feel like the, GSRM identities are becoming more normalized.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, obviously we're not there yet. We still have work to do, but I feel like people are more willing to talk openly about what they like and what they don't like, kinks and fetishes. And like, this is stuff that we can talk more openly about. It's not necessarily just reserved for, the 5 minutes before we have sex. So are we finally starting to overcome those sort of oppressive, puritanical roots? Are we getting there?
Well, I think that we have to define who the we is here.
Okay, half of us finally moving forward.
I think we're starting to normalize. Let's go back here. The whole reason I wrote Sex and God was because I saw atheists that were still had Christian uptightness about their own sexuality and their own bodies. I saw atheists who didn't understand the basic biology around human development and sexual development and the differences and what happens in the body and what happens in the fetus. They just didn't understand any of that. And then you added that, they thought, kind of like I did back in the early 80s, that Christian sex was the only kind. And they're fucking atheists.
Yeah.
So we have to. So what I'm seeing is, and why I wrote the book, was to start getting atheists and secularists, whether you call yourself atheist or not, I don't really care.
Yep.
But if you're secular, you have a much broader opportunity to explore your sexuality and know who you really are outside religious brainwashing and indoctrination. And that's what I'm beginning to see. But I still go to speak at conventions, like the American Atheist Convention or Humanist conventions. And I say, how many of you masturbate? And there's still people in that group that can't raise their hand. Now, I'll give you an example of that. I did a talk some years ago at a major university, gigantic university, with a huge secular component to it. And I'm talking to several hundred people in a room. One of those people, I don't know this person. I've never known this person anyway. Before this, they were a PhD psychologist. They were in their 50s. Now remember, he's secular, he's an atheist, he's actually written on the subject, and he's a PhD psychologist. At the beginning of my talk, I say, I masturbate. How many of you masturbate? His hand did not go up. Now, I didn't know the guy, so I didn't even notice his hand didn't go up. 2 years later, or 3 years later, I'm making a talk again in another university where he's now teaching as a professor. And I do a similar talk and I ask the question again. Well, this time his hand goes up. Well, I'm not, there's hundreds of people in the room. I'm not looking for every hand that goes up. We go out to dinner afterwards and he joins us and he sidles up to me and says, I got to talk to you. Okay, let's talk. Said, I've seen you do that talk twice now. And I could not raise my hand the first time. Even though I masturbate once or twice a day, I couldn't raise my hand. And I'm an atheist. And I'm a fucking PhD psychologist.
Yeah.
He said, that one question you asked made me think about my real sexuality. Who am I? What am I? And he said, but I raised my hand this time. Today when I heard, I raised my hand. I just think it is so fundamental. And people think I talk about masturbation way too much. But Sarah, that's your first sexual relationship is with yourself.
Yeah, and you're likely last.
Yeah, if you can't be comfortable with your own sexuality, whatever your preferences are, whatever your tendency, I don't give a shit, then if you aren't comfortable with who you are. You've got to do. So I start with that in every talk and I almost never is there a time when I don't start with masturbation. The most fundamental thing we as human beings do. And we're doing it at 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
So it's perfect for the talk you're going to be doing. How do we prevent teen? Well, the best prevention for teen pregnancy is probably masturbating.
Right. Yes.
They won't hear that though. But you got to say it. Right.
Well, and you talk too. There's another sort of a topic about, it's about exerting control over our children's sexuality, and if you want, you can go down this rabbit hole, not today, but another time perhaps. Where how do we view our children? Are they autonomous human beings that we're stewards of? Or are they property to be, just printed the rules upon? So I think there's a wide range of the way that people look at their kids. But when we talk about when it comes to when our children start being sexual beings, I think about all of the ways that religion has tried to curb that and control it. And one of those that's a very personal issue to me now is circumcision. And I have, in the past few years, become somewhat of an intactivist, a little less activist, but definitely not a fan of circumcision. Right. Not in the routine American sense, at least. I see that as sort of the way I see vaccines now. If there's a medical necessity, then sure. But otherwise, we, for vaccine exemptions, again, that should be a medical necessity, but nothing else. And I have a son, and I didn't come to that realization until after we had our son. And so there's a lot of guilt that I'm still working through. And I mean, I can remember he was, we've always talked to him as if he were just a little adult, right? And so he may have been 5 or 6. And we had this conversation because he was discovering his body and he knew what a penis was. And he was old enough to get that, you know, he saw the picture of the baby strapped down to the board. We did an episode on my personal podcast about this, and we had some experts come on to talk about it. And so the graphic for that show was a picture of a baby strapped down to that little awful chair. And he saw the picture and wanted to know what it was and what was going on. So it opened the door to this really great conversation that we could have with him. And I think now that we've had that conversation, while I have the guilt that I've carried and I'm working to shed over the consent that was violated in him, and all of the other things that tie into it, at least I think he's better prepared now that if he decides to have children, that he may make a different decision.
Well,
that was deep, Darrel. I didn't plan on going there.
You and I are on exactly the same page there. And we did the same thing.
Yep.
I have a son, and we made the decision to have it wasn't even a question. Nobody debated it.
Nope.
And I fucking look back and think that was a really stupid thing.
Yeah.
And okay, I don't feel guilty about it anymore. I was doing the best I had with what I had.
Yep.
But I'm not gonna. It's like my good friend David Warnock. He says, "Do the best you can until you know better, and then do better."
Yep.
Well, that's where I'm at, and that's where you're at. We're gonna do better for the next generation, even though we didn't do better necessarily by our kids. You know, parents are not perfect, and I'm by a long shot. I never wouldn't even aspire to be a perfect parent. And I made other mistakes. I'm positive I made. Well, my children certainly think I made mistakes. For one, I didn't take them to Disney World when they wanted me to take them. So that was a big mistake in their estimation. You'll identify with that one.
Oh yes.
So I'm a big intactivist. In fact, just Google my name and circumcision and look at my 1 minute video that came from one of my talks several years ago. You'll get my summary of my views on circumcision.
Yeah, it just.
Here's the deal. You and I mean, it's not just circumcision. It's the fact that we didn't even question.
Yep.
And I've gone to, in fact, the reason that little video exists is because I was at a talk, and a very rabid atheist stands up and questions me about my stand on circumcision. Well, why the hell do we even? He's still infected with religion, or as a woman in this case, she was still infected with religious ideas. Mm-hmm. And she had, I think at the time, she had 3 sons, and she had them all 3 circumcised. And when she asked that question, I could kind of hear the, oh shit, kind of, I made a mistake, but I'm going to defend it. You know, I'm going to defend my decision. And I can understand that kind of guilt and shame. I very much understand it.
Yeah.
But let's move on and do better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. To your point, like even in 2010, when our son was born, literally they don't do it at the hospital. You go to your pediatrician and they do it as an office visit. But like we were checking out of the hospital really, and they were just, okay, let's go down the list. Okay, this is what you need to do for this, and keep an eye out for that, and watch for this. And in the next week, you want to make an appointment with your doctor to have a circumcision done. That's between you and your doctor, and that was it. It wasn't a question of, do you want it, and let me present any information on either side of the issue. It was just, here's a thing we do in America, and you do that at your doctor. It was, yeah.
Well, we intactivists, you are being a part of our informal group, are going to change that.
Yeah.
You're seeing circumcisions dropping dramatically in the United States right now.
Yep.
Of course, they were never an issue in Europe.
Right.
Europeans never got the disease, the Kellogg cereal disease
Yes.
of
Yeah.
circumcision.
All right. Well, let's do this. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but let's wrap it up on there and make a date to do it again. So before we go, take a minute. If you've got anything you want to plug, or if there's anything we didn't cover that you want to jump into, let's do that.
Well, yeah, of course. Go take a look at my books, The God Virus and Sex and God. But more interesting, my current interest is in educating people on religious trauma. I just did a talk literally yesterday or Sunday on religious trauma syndrome at the local Oasis. It's up on the internet. You can watch it. Unfortunately, they had some sound problems kind of in the middle of it, but
I watched it. It was watchable. Yeah, it was listenable.
I couldn't hear you. What?
I watched that video. It was very good. It was listenable. I was able to hear it fine.
Okay, good. Well, yeah. And so I want to start educating people about religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome. And to that end, the Secular Therapy Project that I founded 8 years ago is a co-sponsor of a major conference that's happening in British Columbia, Vancouver in April. So I know your viewers won't necessarily go to the conference, but at least pay attention to what's going on there. Maybe watch my talk or other talks. We want people to start realizing that you may be secular now, but you may still have residual effects and literal trauma that was caused when you were spanked for masturbating by your religious parents, when you were shamed for exhibiting a sexual preference that they didn't approve of, or sexual behaviors. You may have been traumatized because you were threatened with hell over and over again by your grandmother. I mean, there's a number of things that I don't want to go into that today. You and I don't have time to talk about it. And not everybody on this planet was traumatized by religion, and I'm not saying that. But there's enough of them out there, and there's secular people that are experiencing trauma that they probably need to deal with. So, yeah, and if you need a therapist, if for any reason something we said today triggered something that you want to deal with, find a secular therapist. Don't be looking up therapists in the phone book, because too many of them are, well, they don't have phone books anymore, do they? Too many therapists are poorly trained and they're religious. So find a secular therapist, and you can go to seculartherapy.org, enter our database, simple thing to register, and you can start looking. We've got a bunch of therapists in your area, Sarah. And if you just want to talk to somebody that is a kind person that's willing to listen and willing to help you find resources, go to Recovering from Religion, hit the chat button or call the phone line and chat with somebody. Now, if you don't get somebody, keep trying, because we're all volunteers. We don't always have a volunteer ready to chat with somebody. But recoveringfromreligion.org, hit the chat button, call the phone, whatever. We will help you. We're here to help anybody trying to deal with the consequences of leaving a religion. We want to help people find hope, healing, and support for their journey. No matter what your journey is, we'll even send you back to church.
Yep.
We are agnostic with respect to what you want to do with your life. Do whatever the fuck you want to do. And we're here to help you. We're here to support you. And that's kind of, you know all about this, Sarah. You helped us. So.
I do, yeah. So let me give one sort of last personal pitch on your behalf for the Secular Therapy Project.
Okay.
So when we were, we'll leave on this fun story. When I decided that I needed to do something about being trans, something that I dealt with my entire life, that I discovered, probably 12, 13 years old, and went to a therapist who didn't understand it and was just asked, well, why are you taking your mom's bras?
Yeah.
I don't know the words can't describe what I'm feeling or why, or that's why I'm here. So having had that experience that it didn't help, and we didn't seek a second opinion, and so I dealt with this stuff all of my life, and eventually we're all way down the line, and I decided 5 or so years ago, no, this isn't something that I do. This is who I am, and I need to do something about it. So the first step for anyone who's not aware of the process is you have to get a letter from a therapist in order to go and get hormone replacement therapy. And so there is an office in Orlando, and this is all they do is trans care. And now they've sort of expanded. It was started by a therapist, and then it expanded out. They opened a medical office, but their idea was they wanted to create a one-stop shop. You come here and get your electrolysis hair removal and laser hair removal, and if you want, surgeries, like they would do it all in-house.
Right.
And so we went there, and one of the very first sessions was just, it was, again, this is what they do, right? So we talked for an hour, and at the end of the hour, she said, well, you are classic gender identity, gender dysphoria, or whatever it was called in the DSM at the time. I think it was still GID. And she said, when do you want to start? And I said, 15 years ago, and we had a nice laugh. So then I came home and I had a conversation with my wife about it. And she knew this about me. This wasn't a big surprise, but that I was going to be doing something about it was something that we needed to sort of face together. And so she had a lot of legitimate questions about, how's this going to affect me? And this isn't what I signed up for. And, I'm not attracted to women. I don't know how this is going to work. So back to the therapist we went, the two together, to talk all this stuff out. And I kid you not, we were talking about like life was tough at the time. We had our first child already, and trying to juggle. We both worked, and I was off and on salary at the time, so we never really knew what our income was, and just things were frustrating in the work realm. And I shit you not, Darrel, she says to me, "Well, there's a video I'd like for you guys to go home and watch together. It's called The Secret." And you just need to, this job problem will go away if you just put it out into the universe.
Oh, fuck.
And we didn't go back to her.
Get the hell out of that office. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Ooh, that just angers me.
Oh, me too. So what I did do then, we moved in the intervening years a little bit down the road, and I was looking for someone closer because Orlando's quite a drive. And so I did. I pulled up the virtual phone book and started making phone calls. I tried to find people who specialized in trans care, and is just, do I know anybody here? Who do you see? And so I made some phone calls, and the very first thing I asked was, do you use an evidence-based approach? Evidence-based methods. And so, or are we going to, pray the trans away? And the therapist that I have now, I told her the story that I just told you all about The Secret, and she was just gobsmacked. Her jaw hit the floor, and that's when I knew I'm coming to your office.
Yeah, right. Excellent.
Oh, well, anyway, Darrel, thanks for chatting with me today. Let's do this again. This has been fun.
Right.
You have an open invitation. Come down and visit sometime. That'd be a lot of fun.
Well, I'll be in Miami, but that's not too close to you. I'm going to be, what am I doing? I'm at the International Humanist.
Yes.
In August. So, but I don't get down there very often. I ought to come down because I'd like to visit my old friend Dan.
Yeah.
Has your therapist registered with the Secular Therapy Project?
I don't know. I did tell her to do so. Now I got to follow up. Yeah,
well, that's between she and we don't talk out loud about. It's confidential.
Sure. Yeah, but my God, it's a resource that is definitely needed, because it is, especially in areas like this where there's a church on every corner. It's hard to find people that. Yeah.
Our therapist will not pray with you. I'll guarantee that. We vet them very carefully, and they use evidence-based. If they don't, they won't be in our database. It's that simple.
Excellent.
Sarah, great talking to you. I would love to do it again.
Yes, let's do it. Sounds great.
Something else to talk about.
You bet. I'm sure we will. I could talk all day.
Say hi to my friend Dan.
I will do so.
Okay.
Thanks, Darrel. Dr. Darrel Ray. author and founder of Recovering from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project. Again, we'll look in the show notes. We'll have links to Darrel's books and all of those resources in the show notes. If you're in or near Polk County in Florida and you're looking for community, come get involved with the atheist community of Polk County. We would love to see some new folks. We just wrapped up a service project that supports the Hearth Project. We assembled hygiene packs that go to students in Polk County Public School District who are experiencing homelessness. Soap, shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, toothpaste, a comb, deodorant, that sort of thing, washcloths. Just trying to meet some of those basic needs for these students. And Hearth reports around 3,700 students. I'll say that again, 3,700 students in Polk County qualify as homeless under the McKinney-Vento Act annually. So we're committed to helping and being part of the solution there however we can. If you'd like to come out and meet up with us, we do have a meetup Friday night at Buffalo Wild Wings in Lakeland. On Saturday morning, a bunch of the volunteers will be out at our roadway and the Adopt a Road cleanup project in Auburndale. February 6th, again, I'll be at the First Baptist Church in Bartow talking about sex, baby, with a panel of local faith leaders discussing sex and faith and educating our youth about issues involving sex. And then February 15th, I'll be giving a presentation called Project Blitz, Inside the Playbook of the Religious Right. I gave a version of this presentation to the Central Florida Freethought community in Orlando last year, and I'm in the process of basically rewriting it from the ground up with a new sort of 2020 twist. They update this document every year, and I'm giving it more of a Florida flair and talk about how this is affecting us here, because we're considering the Bible class bill again in the state legislature and some other things. And so that'll be February 15th at the Lake Wales Public Library. In March, Dave Warnock will be in town. Interestingly enough, we just mentioned Dave, and if you haven't heard of Dave, what a guy! He's a former conservative evangelical pastor and church leader, and he was recently diagnosed with ALS last year. And so, in sort of the face of such a serious sentence, he decided that, I'm going to enjoy every moment instead of giving in to despair. So Dave will make you reconsider everything you've ever thought about death and dying, and his story underscores just how delicate and brief our lives truly are, and why we all need to carpe the fucking diem. There's so much great stuff like this happening right here in Polk County. You can find all of these events on our Facebook and Meetup, and if you want to learn more about the ACPC, go to polkatheists.org to find out what we're all about, make a donation, see how you can get involved. Again, that's polkatheists.org. Our many thanks again to Dr. Darrel Ray, and we'll see you again soon. Freethought in Florida is a production of the atheist community of Polk County, a Florida nonprofit organization.